Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyana Habibillahi Rabbil Alameen Abil Qasim Al-Mustafa Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin al-masumin al-mazlumin. Wa la'natu ad-da'ima ala adaihim ajma'in min al'an ila qiyam yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective, a program that look at the Islamic perspective or the spiritual perspective in regards to different realities that Islam faces. We talked about art and literature in our previous program, and we said that we're going to look at the Islamic world in modern times and how Islam have faced challenges after challenges. So far we looked at the Islamic perspective in regards to the Quran, in regards to Hadith, in regards to man, in regards to God, in regards to universe. And after that we also kind of pointed out to the historical, educational, scientific or the Islamic sciences that existed and how it came about and how it became a very rich and strong civilization. We also looked at the importance of art and literature in Islam and the philosophy behind that. And today we will look at something very important and see how Islam and how Islamic world is in the modern times and what challenges they have faced. Obviously, as we are aware that the Islamic world today stretches from Atlantic to Pacific, from southern India and heart of Africa to Siberia, from Bosnia, from northern parts of Europe, and also we have Africa, Albania. So Islamic world have stretched this far. Now it has continuously faced challenges right from the very beginning, and with these challenges that it has faced today, it has lost the traditional, it has lost the impetus of that how it used to spread before as a civilization. And however, we still see the remnants of this civilization in art, in literature, in some of the buildings that are there, but it has faced severe amount of pressure during past centuries, continuously. And the greatest amount of pressure, or how one would say the first challenge that the modern West to the Islamic world began at the age of exploration, and which we considered that to be the Renaissance. That's how it started from. The first challenge began from there, which is the 15th or 16th century. Prior to that, Islam, and while the Renaissance was going on as well, it didn't really occur to Muslims and Muslim scholars of any interest that what's going on in Europe as such, because they were indulged and involved in their own cosmos, in their own universe, in their own expeditions. Now, colonization starts, Europe expanding, then you have the Napoleon sort of engaging or entering the lands of Africa, and then followed by the the British, the Portuguese, then France. We are talking about 1798. Egypt was invaded by Napoleon. So obviously you have this Muslim world being attacked under the pretext of expansion, under the pretext of promoting modernism, if you want to call that thought that came out of Renaissance. After the Napoleonic conquest of Egypt, Muslims begin to realize that a great tragedy was about to befall on Islam and the Islamic world. The event of the invasion of Egypt was followed by the completion of British domination in India. So you have these European countries entering into Muslim lands and conquering it and taking over. Like for example, you have the Tsars in Russia entering in Persia. Battles occurred there. So something horrific happened to the Islamic world. Now, for them, it was something of a more cosmic dimension. They came to the realization, the Muslim Ummah, if you want to call, or the scholars or the thinkers, they came to the realization that there is something on the cosmic level, on the spiritual level, that they've been punished because, as for them and as for Muslims, if Allah helps you, none can overcome you. For example, mentioned in Surah Al Imran, verse number 160. So for them, when the Europe conquered most parts of the Islamic world, the domination of the West, and the Muslim thinkers all of a sudden, they said that something went wrong. We were not sincere enough to God. We turned our back to our God. There was lack of purity. There was lack of sincerity. It is very much required by us that we return back to the Quran and Hadith. And we have to once again, transform our present situation to the ancestors, which they call it Salaf. Going back, Salaf. Fundamentalist reformation started taking place. This was the first group of people, or the first type of awakening that took place among the Muslims. And they said that we have to really return back to our ancestral practices. This was seen in the form of Abdul Wahab in Arabia, where he was considered to be the fundamentalist reformer, referred by the Orientalists, by the West, where he adheres strictly to the practices of the Sharia in a hardcore fashion, which is seen in the Islamic Hanbali community even till today, for example. So his call, his approach, or this type of group could be considered as the fundamentalist reformers, quote unquote, who tried to return back to the Quran and Hadith strictly and adhere to the principles without ifs and buts, without questioning it, without interpretation of it. Then you have the second group. This is all taking place during that time, when Western colonies were flourishing, Western expansion was taking place from France, from Europe, from Italy, from northern parts of Africa. The Horn of Africa was taken away. The India was taken. The Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Persians, by the Russians. So in this sort of midst of turmoil, then the thinkers started to come up with a solution so that they return back, so that Islam remains how it used to be, the powerful force in the world, a great civilization. Then you have the second group, which has come to known as the modernist or modernist reformers. You have which covers a spectrum of thinkers, some of whom sought to expand the idea of nationalism. They took the idea of nationalism and they started promoting nationalism. While promoting so, they also promoted Islam. I am Egyptian, this is my country, and I believe in Islam. So therefore, it was more of a Islamic propagation under the dress libas of nationalism. This we are talking about the late 19th and early 20th century. For example, you have the great thinker Jamaluddin al-Afghani, who sought to, on one hand, go back to the political unity of Islamic world. He talked about that. He raised that politically all Muslims should unite. Having said that, he also, unfortunately, had the certain of his followers or students, or if you want to say, he had the tendency of fundamentalist reformer like Abdul Wahab as well, because his students such as Muhammad Abdo of Egypt, once again, who tried to modernize Islamic theology itself by giving a more central position to reason in the matters of faith, but at the same time he had that Sharia or fundamental tendencies. Then you have the Sheikh al-Azhar, the Grand Mufti of Egypt, who influenced the Islamic world in the 19th century, although he did not last very long. He tried to influence it. So you are seeing these pockets of awakening Muslim thinkers trying to pile up the mess that has been done to the Islamic civilization or to the Islamic world through their different approaches and methodologies by which Islam could still remain and be practiced. In terms of the second group, you also find, as we said, the second group is the modernist thinker. You have Ziya Gökalp of Turkey, whose interest was in sociology or Islamic sociology, which would separate Islam as it was traditionally understood from the domain of public life. In India, you have the modernist thinker Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, who tried to adapt or replicate the educational system of British in order that Muslims would have some sort of position under the British Raj. He was also a modernist. His interpretations of the Quran is also point of criticism. Now, after Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in India, Then you have one of the another influential philosopher, once at called as a philosopher, was at once a philosopher, was a poet, is Iqbal, Muhammad Iqbal, Iqbal Lahori, who once again tried to raise the slogan of unity, unite the Muslims, and influence the Muslim nations very deeply by 19th century, and provided them with an identity that they should be proud of. However, he also expounded on Western philosophical ideas. Unfortunately, they were not at all in confirmation with the traditional Islamic sciences or with the traditional Islamic thought. Once again, you would see that modern Western influential tendencies within Iqbal as well. Then you have the third group. This was the second group. The first group Ibn Taymiyyah, reform, Salaf, trying to return back. The second group is the modernist, who to a certain extent provided an identity, who tried to approach Western sciences and tried to adapt it, unknowingly the influence of these sciences upon the Islamic Ummah as well. The system of education, for example, and the effect of this system of education upon the Muslim world without understanding, they have embarked upon that, which is modernist type of approach, in order to pile up the mess that the Islamic civilization or Islam was in. The third group, as we see that certain figures who claim themselves to be Mahdi or Bab to the Mahdi, door to the Mahdi, and who began religious movements of great consequences, both political and also religiously. For example, you have Usman Dan Fodio in West Africa, the founder of Mujahideen. This movement in the northern western province of India created new political entities, and in fact had remarkable success against much superior Western colonial military might of the day. Then you have in Persia, in Iran, Sayyid Muhammad Bab, who opened a gate of controversy within Shia Islam, which led finally through his student Baha'u'llah to establish a new faith, the Baha'is. We also see a very similar response to this challenge that Islam had faced with the Mirzais, where, for example, even today you have their followers, which is also a controversy, which was also a controversial. Now, in the margin, I would mention that some tend to say that these are all conspiracies by the West. Abdul Wahab, the Wahhabi movement, it is something that the British have created it. Or the Baha'i movement, it is something that British have created it. Or the Mirzais, for example, where it started in India, once again, it is the British who have created it in order to divide, in order to attack Islam. whether it be that the Western powers have done so, or whether it be that the Muslims, they themselves thought that they have to do something about it in order that the Western influence should not be on their traditional society or in the Muslim culture, Muslim land. They themselves initiated something that they have to really do something about it. What do they have to do? Well, they have to do something, and they thought that we need to be fundamental reformists, for example, or we need to be someone who goes back to the Salaf, or someone who becomes a modernist. So therefore, regardless, we see that Islam has been challenged. The principles of Islam, the Quran, a religion that's been given for all of mankind to save humanity, to establish justice, social justice. Now we see that within itself, by miscalculation of these scholars, perhaps with the intentions of rectifying it, perhaps with the intention of making sense of this challenge that they are facing, and a response to this challenge, it went down the drain as such. They were trapped. It didn't really succeed. Then you see similar pocket awakenings by the Sufi orders in Africa. You have the Darqawi, you have the Sanusiya, you have the Tijani, So when Islam came under attack, when Islam faced these challenges, Muslim thinkers, they approached this issue of challenge in different ways. The Sufis, they form their groups in order that they protect their identity, in order that they protect their Islam, and different offshoots of one tariqah came about. I think we'll take a short break and we'll continue the Islamic world in modern times right after this short break.